The marble lobby of Crestview Capital Investments smelled of money, not the kind you touch, but the kind you feel in the air. Expensive perfume, polished floors, glass walls reflecting designer shoes and cold ambition. It was the kind of place where people didn't come to ask, they came to belong. But that morning, a young woman named Aaliyah Carter didn't quite fit that mold. She stood at the reception desk in a neat white blouse and modest skirt, clutching an envelope with both hands. Her hair was tied back, her smile polite but nervous. Inside the envelope was a $150,000 investment check, a grant she'd won through an entrepreneurship contest for her small tech startup. It was the biggest day of her life. Behind the counter sat Mr. Harrison, Crestview's senior account manager, a tall man in an expensive suit, his sultan pepper hair slicked back, his cufflinks gleaming like medals of superiority. He barely looked up as Aaliyah approached. Yes. His voice was clipped, impatient. Aaliyah smiled. Good morning, sir. I'm here to open an account for my business and deposit this check. She carefully placed the envelope on the counter. Harrison glanced at it, then at her slowly, with the kind of look that measured more than credentials. Is this your check? Yes, sir. It's under my name, Aaliyah Carter, founder of Loomtech. He chuckled softly. And this firm gave you this kind of funding? Her smile faltered slightly. Yes, sir. I won a national contest for minority entrepreneurs. This is the investment capital. He raised an eyebrow. I see. He took the check, holding it up to the light as if inspecting it for invisible lies. Then he smirked. You'd be surprised how many people try to cash fake checks with big dreams and no sense. Aaliyah blinked. Excuse me. He shrugged. You wouldn't believe what I've seen. People print checks online, walk in here thinking they'll fool us. But Crestview isn't some neighborhood credit union. She swallowed, voice tightening. It's not fake. I can show you the paperwork, he interrupted sharply. I'll be the judge of that. He turned to the receptionist. Security protocol. Please. Let's verify this miracle check. A few people in the lobby turned their heads. Aaliyah's cheeks burned. Sir, that's not necessary. Oh, it is, he said coldly. Fraud prevention is our top priority. The receptionist hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. Mr. Harrison, maybe now, he snapped. A moment later, a uniformed guard appeared by the door. The sound of his shoes on the marble floor echoed like humiliation itself. Aaliyah's heart pounded. People were whispering. She could feel their eyes, rich clients in suits, staring at her like she didn't belong. I can call the organization right now, she said quietly. They'll confirm, but Harrison wasn't listening. He tore the check in half. RIIIP. The sound cut through the air like a slap. Gasps filled the lobby. Aaliyah froze. You can't do that. Oh, I can, he said flatly. Fake checks get destroyed on site. You're lucky I don't call the police for attempted fraud. Her eyes glistened. That check was my life's work. My dream. You just. He leaned closer, his tone dripping with condescension. Dreams don't pay bills, Miss Carter, especially when they come from people who don't understand business. That was the moment her composure cracked. People like me? She asked softly. He straightened, unfazed. I didn't say that. But he didn't have to. The security guard stepped closer. Everything all right, sir? Harrison waved him off. She was just leaving. Aaliyah's throat tightened as she grabbed the torn pieces of her check from the counter. Her hands trembled as she pressed them together, as if she could will the paper and her dignity back into one piece. She turned and walked out of the firm, the whispers following her like shadows. Outside, the city air hit her face like cold truth. She stood on the steps, staring at the torn check in her hands. Her phone buzzed, a call from her mother. Victoria Carter. Aaliyah hesitated, then answered. Hey Mum, hey sweetheart. Her mother's voice came warm and calm. How did it go at the firm? Aaliyah's voice cracked. They tore it up. Mom, silence. Then, her mother's tone changed, still calm, but sharp as glass. What did you say? They said the check looked fake. The manager called security. Victoria exhaled slowly, the kind of breath that comes before a storm. Stay where you are, she said quietly. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Mom, it's okay, I can. No, Victoria interrupted. They just disrespected the wrong family. And before Aaliyah could respond, the line went dead. She didn't know what her mother meant, but she was about to find out, because Victoria Carter wasn't just any mother. She was the CEO and majority shareholder of Crestview Capital Investments, and in 15 minutes, the same marble lobby that smelled of power would learn what real power looked like. The clock on the marble wall ticked past 11 inside Crestview Capital Investments. The same cold, polished air that had suffocated Aaliyah now hummed with quiet routine, phones ringing, heels clicking, keyboards tapping. Mr. Harrison leaned back in his leather chair, sipping coffee as if nothing had happened. He'd already forgotten the young woman's name. To him, she was just another nobody who tried to look important in a place that only respected numbers, not dreams. But in precisely 13 minutes, the door that had always obeyed him would open to someone it never dared to control. Outside, a sleek black Rolls-Royce pulled up to the curb. The driver stepped out, walking swiftly to open the back door. Out stepped Victoria Carter. She wore a tailored charcoal grey suit that fit like command. Her hair was pinned neatly, her heels clicked with authority, and her presence alone drew stares. Not because she was beautiful, but because she was undeniable. People didn't look at Victoria Carter. They looked up to her, whether they knew it yet or not. Beside her, Aaliyah followed quietly, still shaken but now curious. Mum, she said softly. You really don't have to. Victoria stopped, turning to her daughter with calm precision. Her voice was gentle, but it carried a quiet storm. Aaliyah, there are lessons you learn by patience, and lessons you teach by presence. Today, I'm teaching. Aaliyah nodded silently. They entered the lobby. The receptionist looked up, eyes widening. Good morning, Mrs. Carter. We weren't expecting you today. I don't schedule unannounced visits, Victoria replied, her tone smooth but cold. I observed them. The receptionist stood immediately. Of course, ma'am. Mr. Harrison is in his office. Shall I? No need, Victoria interrupted. I'll find him myself. Aaliyah stood beside her mother. Watching in awe, the entire lobby seemed to shift, like the air itself recognized its owner in his office. Harrison was mid-conversation with a client when his door swung open without a knock. He frowned. Excuse me, I'm in the middle of... Then he froze. Victoria Carter stepped inside. The client immediately stood up, startled. Mrs. Carter. I didn't realize you were Victoria, smiled politely. You can reschedule with my assistant. I need a moment with Mr. Harrison. The client nodded quickly and left the room, closing the door behind him. Harrison stood, forcing a smile. Mrs. Carter. What an unexpected surprise. Her eyes locked on him, calm, sharp, and unreadable. Is it? He laughed awkwardly. I just mean, it's an honor. To what do I owe the pleasure? Victoria stepped closer, resting her hands lightly on his desk. I heard there was an incident this morning. Something about a fraudulent check. His fake smile faltered. Yes, unfortunate situation. A young woman tried to deposit what appeared to be a counterfeit. I followed standard procedure. Standard procedure, Victoria repeated softly. You tore it up, correct? Well, he stammered, yes. Our firm takes reputation seriously. We can't risk reputation. Her tone sharpened. You humiliated a client in the middle of our lobby, called security, and destroyed a verified check issued by one of our partner organizations. All because she didn't look like your definition of wealthy. Harrison blinked. I wasn't profiling anyone. Victoria cut him off. Then what were you doing? He swallowed hard. I was following fraud prevention guidelines. Her eyes narrowed. Fraud prevention doesn't require arrogance. It requires evidence. He shifted nervously. If I may ask, how did you even find out about this? Victoria leaned back slightly, her expression unreadable. Because, she said, voice steady, The young woman you disrespected is my daughter." The silence that followed felt eternal. Harrison's mouth fell open. "Why your daughter? Correct?" He turned pale. I had no idea, Mrs. Carter." "I didn't mean." Victoria's tone cut through his excuses. "You didn't mean to tear up a legitimate check? Or, you didn't mean to reveal what kind of man you truly are?" He stuttered. "Mrs. Carter, please, if I had known." She stepped closer, eyes locked on his. "If you had known, you'd have shown respect. Which means the problem isn't policy, Mr. Harrison. It's prejudice." He tried to speak again, but her calm silence drowned him. Outside the office, employees had begun to whisper. They could hear every word through the glass. Victoria turned slightly, her voice lower but razor-sharp. "Tell me, Mr. Harrison," she said, "how long have you worked here?" 10 years, he stammered. 10 years, she repeated. 10 years of experience, and still not 1 ounce of discernment. He swallowed, shaking slightly. "Mrs. Carter, please. You tore up my daughter's check in front of clients. Accused her of fraud and embarrassed her for the color of her skin. The only check being cancelled today is your paycheck." His breath caught. "Wait, you're firing me?" Victoria straightened. "Effective immediately. HR will finalize your exit package by the end of the hour. You're dismissed." She turned to the door, then paused. "And one more thing." He looked up desperately. "Next time you see a young black woman walk into a room like she belongs, remember, she probably does. You just don't know it yet." She opened the door. Aaliyah stood there, watching. Victoria extended a hand to her daughter. "Come, sweetheart. We have a company to run." Aaliyah hesitated, then took her mother's hand, and as they walked out together, every whisper in that marble hallway turned into awe. In that moment, the balance of power shifted forever, and for the first time, Aaliyah realized her mother didn't just own the company, she owned respect. The echo of their footsteps followed them down the corridor, to women, side by side, one forged by fire, the other by grace. Every employee they passed froze mid-conversation. Some whispered, some stood straighter. Everyone knew. By the time Victoria and Olia reached the executive boardroom, a quiet storm had gathered behind the glass walls. The senior partners, analysts, and staff were already there, called for an emergency meeting. Only a few knew who had called it. The glass doors opened, and silence fell like a curtain. Victoria entered first, Aaliyah followed. Head held high this time, Mr. Harrison wasn't in sight. His nameplate had already been removed from the desk outside. Victoria stood at the end of the long mahogany table, her hands resting lightly on the polished surface. "Good afternoon," she said calmly. Dozens of eyes turned toward her, some curious, others nervous. "Before we begin, I want to make something clear." Her gaze swept the room, steady and sharp. "This is not a disciplinary hearing, it's an awakening." Murmurs rippled. She continued, voice low but commanding. "This morning, an employee of Crestview Capital humiliated a potential client in our lobby. He accused her of fraud, destroyed her verified check, and called security, all without cause." A few staff members glanced at each other uneasily. Victoria nodded. The reason? She didn't look like a woman who could own success. Her voice grew heavier. "The woman in question is my daughter." A hush so complete followed that even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to fade. Aaliyah stood quietly beside her, fingers clasped in front of her. Victoria continued, tone calm but cold. "I built this firm to be a symbol of trust and opportunity, not judgment and exclusion. Yet today, one of my own managers reminded me that even within glass walls, bias can still cast shadows." A young intern near the back whispered, "She owns the company." Victoria heard. She smiled faintly. "Yes, I am the founder, CEO, and majority shareholder of Crestview Capital Investments, and this morning, one of my employees disrespected my daughter, and, by extension, everything this company claims to stand for." Her words were heavy, deliberate. "If we are to represent wealth, we must first represent worth. Every client, regardless of color, background, or title, deserves dignity, not suspicion. The head of HR cleared her throat nervously. Mrs. Carter, we had no idea. Victoria raised a hand. That's the problem. You didn't need to know she was my daughter to do the right thing. The room went still again. Aaliyah looked at her mother with quiet awe. She wasn't angry anymore, she was proud. Victoria straightened, her presence filling the space. As of today, Crestview Capital will undergo mandatory sensitivity and ethics training. I'll personally oversee the curriculum. We'll rebuild this firm from its foundation, starting with humanity. She turned slightly toward the large glass wall overlooking the city skyline. Outside, the sun glared against the mirrored buildings, golden, unforgiving, yet full of possibility. I will not allow arrogance to be our legacy, she said softly. We built this firm on excellence, not ego. One of the senior partners spoke cautiously. Mrs. Carter, if I may, does this mean Mr. Harrison? He's been terminated, she replied without hesitation. His behavior was unprofessional, unethical, and entirely out of alignment with Crestview's mission. And let me make this clear. Anyone who shares those values, arrogance, prejudice, entitlement, can follow him out the same door. A few heads lowered. Others nodded in quiet approval. Victoria glanced at Aaliyah. Now, my daughter has something to say. Aaliyah froze. Mum, you've earned this moment, Victoria said gently. Speak. Aaliyah stepped forward, her voice trembling at first, but growing steadier with each word. When I walked into this building, I thought I didn't belong, she said softly. I thought success had a look, a color, an accent, but now I know the only thing that defines worth is perseverance. She glanced at the employees seated before her. I don't want anyone else to walk into a place of opportunity and be treated like an outsider. Because people like me, like us, aren't asking for favors, we're demanding fairness. Her mother watched proudly as Aaliyah's voice grew stronger. My company, Loomtech, will still bank with Crestview, she said, because this is my mother's vision, and I believe in what it can be. But I hope that next time, when another woman like me walks through those doors, she's greeted with respect, not suspicion. Applause filled the room, genuine, emotional, and loud. Some employees even stood. Clapping, Victoria smiled faintly, placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder. Well said. Then she turned to the staff once more. Let this be a reminder, you never know who's watching, or who's walking through your door, so treat everyone like they already belong, because respect costs nothing, and losing it costs everything. When the meeting ended, employees gathered around Aaliyah, congratulating her, apologizing, asking questions about her startup. The same firm that had looked down on her, now looked up to her. As they left the boardroom, Aaliyah whispered, Mum, that was incredible. You didn't just defend me, you changed them. Victoria smiled, her eyes soft now. That's what leadership is, baby. Turning pain into policy. Aaliyah laughed quietly. You make it sound so easy. Her mother chuckled. It's never easy. But it's always worth it. They walked through the glass doors together, sunlight washing over them like victory itself. 2 days later, the glass tower of Crestview Capital Investments was trending online, but not for its profits. The video of Aaliyah and her mother in the boardroom had leaked. No one knew who recorded it, but the world couldn't stop watching. A CEO defends her daughter after racist bank manager. Tears up her check. She owned the firm, he owned his arrogance. This mother-daughter duo just redefined power. Millions of people watched, commented, shared, and cried. And somewhere inside that storm of attention, something shifted, not just for the Carters, but for everyone who'd ever been told they didn't belong in rooms of power. At home, Aaliyah sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, disbelief painting her face. Her inbox was flooded. News interviews, podcast invitations, venture capital inquiries. Mama, she said, turning the screen toward her mother. This one says Oprah's team wants to talk. Victoria laughed softly, sipping her coffee. Tell them, I'll call after breakfast. Aaliyah's jaw dropped. Mum. Victoria smiled knowingly. Never chase attention, baby. Make attention chase you. She set her mug down, eyes gleaming. Now, show me your inbox. Aaliyah handed her the phone. Victoria scrolled through the emails. Investors, journalists, brand collaborations before stopping at one message. Subject partnership proposal. Lumtech x Crestview, Foundation. It was from the firm's PR director. Victoria read aloud, Mrs. Carter. We'd like to publicly partner with your daughter's company to support minority entrepreneurs. The story of what happened has inspired our clients. They want to invest in inclusion. Olia's eyes widened. Mum, that's Victoria nodded. That's how you turn disrespect into dividends. By the afternoon, their living room had transformed into a media hub. Cameras, lights, microphones, reporters asking how it felt to become symbols of change overnight. Olia stayed poised, but honest. I didn't plan to go viral. I just wanted to be treated fairly. When one journalist asked Victoria, "Do you think this moment will change corporate culture?" she smiled calmly. "One moment won't," she said. "But accountability will. Every arrogant man who saw that video will think twice before tearing up another woman's check." Her tone carried no anger, only conviction that night. As the cameras packed up and silence returned, Olia finally exhaled. "Do you ever get tired, Mum?" she asked quietly. Victoria looked at her for a long moment. "Of what?" "Of having to prove you belong in every room you walk into." Victoria's smile softened. "Every great woman gets tired, baby. But that's how you know you're climbing. Mountains don't tire people who stay at the bottom." Aaliyah leaned against her, smiling faintly. "You always know what to say." "That's because I've lived it," her mother said. "Every closed door teaches you how to build your own." The next morning, Bridge TV News aired their interview worldwide. Clips of Victoria's calm speech and Olia's teary smile spread across TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. Hashtags flooded social feeds. Hashtag respect her check. Hashtag the Carter effect. #dignity has no dress code. By the end of the week, Aaliyah's startup Lumtech had raised more funding in 7 days than she had dreamed of in 7 years. Even Crestview Capital saw a spike in new clients. People who wanted to invest with the firm that stood for fairness. Victoria smirked when she read the reports. "Redemption pays well, doesn't it?" Aaliyah laughed. "You turned a scandal into a marketing campaign." "No," Victoria corrected. "We turned pain into power. There's a difference." But while the world was applauding, one person was quietly watching the news in silence. Mr. Harrison, sitting in his small apartment. He replayed the boardroom video on his phone. Each word cut deeper than the last. He saw himself in the background, stiff, silent, embarrassed, for the first time. He didn't see a victim of cancel culture. He saw the man who'd become the face of arrogance. When Victoria said, "Respect costs nothing, and losing it costs everything," he paused the video. He whispered, "She's right." He opened his laptop and began typing. Not an excuse, but an apology. Days later, an envelope arrived at Crestview's headquarters. No return address. Just one line on the front, "For Mrs. Carter." Inside was a handwritten letter. "Mrs. Carter. There are moments that strip away everything you thought you were. That day in your office was mine. I was arrogant, prejudiced, and blind. You didn't just fire me, you freed me from the man I'd become. If you're willing, I'd like to volunteer for your new training program. No pay, just purpose. Sincerely, Daniel Harrison." Victoria read it in silence, her face unreadable. Then she smiled softly. "Growth looks good on him," she murmured. Aaliyah asked, "You're not mad?" Her mother shook her head. "No. Anger builds walls. Forgiveness builds bridges." Later that evening, Victoria stood on her balcony overlooking the glowing city skyline. For the first time in a long time, she felt peace, not just because justice had been served, but because the lesson had landed. And somewhere down below, in another apartment, a once-proud man began learning humility. 2 different windows. 1 shared lesson: respect doesn't just change the powerful, it redefines them. The world didn't stop talking about the Carters, but Victoria and Olia had already moved past the headlines. For them, the real victory wasn't in the views or applause, it was in the change that followed. One crisp morning, the marble lobby of Crestview Capital Investments looked different. The cold air of silent superiority had been replaced by something warmer, new faces, new energy. Where portraits of old executives once hung, a new display stood tall, the Carter Initiative empowering women to build wealth. The program offered free mentorship, startup funding, and leadership training to women who had faced discrimination in finance or entrepreneurship. At the center of it all was Olia. She wasn't just Victoria's daughter anymore, she was the co-founder of the foundation. And today was its official launch. The boardroom had been transformed into a conference space filled with laughter and energy. Dozens of women, entrepreneurs, students, single mothers, dreamers sat together sharing their stories. Victoria moved through the crowd, shaking hands and smiling. Olia stood at the front, preparing her opening speech. When she finally took the mic, the room quieted. Last year, she began softly. I walked into this very building with a check in my hand, and walked out with it torn in two. Murmurs filled the room. But what I didn't know, she continued, was that something far more valuable survived that day: my purpose. Her eyes scanned the faces in front of her, black, brown, white, young, old, all connected by the same hunger to be seen. I learned that when the world doubts your worth, your best revenge isn't anger. It's success. It's showing up again and again, until the door they closed becomes one you own. The room erupted in applause. Victoria, watching from the side, smiled proudly. Her daughter's voice carried the same strength she once used to build this empire, but it carried something more to empathy. After the ceremony, journalists gathered outside the event. A reporter asked, "Mrs. Carter, what inspired this initiative?" Victoria answered calmly, "Because one act of disrespect can ruin a day, but one act of empowerment can change a generation." Another journalist turned to Olia. "And what's your hope for this foundation?" Olia smiled. "That one day, women won't have to prove their worth, they'll just be recognized for it." Her voice was clear, her tone resolute. Later that week, the Carter Initiative was featured on Forbes, Business Insider, and CNN. But Victoria and Olia didn't focus on the fame, they focused on the inboxes, filled with stories from women across the world. "I was told I didn't look like a CEO. Now, I'm building my first company. Your story helped me walk back into my bank with confidence. My daughter saw your video, now she wants to be an investor." Victoria read each one carefully, smiling through tears. "You see, baby," she said to Olia, "money is a tool. But respect, that's currency for life." Olia laughed softly. "You're starting to sound like one of my TED Talks." Victoria smirked. "I taught you everything you know." Meanwhile, at a modest business workshop downtown, Daniel Harrison, the man once known for tearing checks, now stood in front of a group of trainees. He wore no suit, no title, just humility. "Bias," he said, writing the word on the board, "isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. It hides behind confidence, titles, and experience." He looked at the class of young interns. "But when you choose respect over judgment, you don't just serve your clients, you serve yourself." After class, he sent a text to Victoria. "Training session complete. 25 students. Thank you for trusting me." She replied minutes later, "People can't untear a check, Daniel, but they can rebuild character. Keep going." Months passed, and the Carter Initiative kept growing. It opened offices in New York, Atlanta, and London, offering microgrants to over 500 women. Olia's company partnered with universities to teach digital skills to underprivileged students. One evening, Victoria and Olia sat together in the same office where the story had begun. The one sterile room now had warmth photographs of smiling entrepreneurs, thank you letters framed on the wall. Victoria leaned back in her chair. watching the city lights flicker beyond the glass. You know, she said quietly, I spent half my life trying to be taken seriously by people who thought I was lucky to be here. But the real blessing was you. Aaliyah smiled, eyes glistening. Me, yes, you, her mother said. Because you reminded me that power isn't about control. It's about creating space for others. Aaliyah's voice softened. You did that for me, Mum. And now, Victoria replied, you're doing it for the world. That night, as the two women stood by the office window overlooking the skyline, the city seemed to shimmer a little brighter. Not because of money, but because of meaning. Their reflection in the glass said it. All, 2 generations, 1 mission. A legacy built from respect. A year later, the Carter Initiative had grown beyond even Victoria's wildest dreams. What started as one moment of humiliation inside a corporate lobby had become a worldwide symbol of hope and empowerment. From New York to Nairobi, women carried the Carter name like a badge of courage, and today, Aaliyah was boarding a plane to see that change in person. The city of London glimmered under the early morning sun as her car pulled up to the glass doors of the Global Women's Leadership Forum. Photographers lined the entryway, flashes bursting like fireworks. The banners outside read, Keynote Speaker Aaliyah Carter, co-founder of the Carter Initiative. She stepped out, dressed in a cream pantsuit, elegance wrapped in calm confidence. Her mother had wanted to come, but Victoria stayed behind to handle a new partnership in the US. Go show them what dignity sounds like. She'd said on the phone that morning, don't now, as Aaliyah entered the vast hall filled with hundreds of women from across the world. She carried her mother's words like armor. Backstage, a young volunteer approached her nervously. Ms. Carter, she said, voice trembling slightly. I'm so honored to meet you. My name is Naya. Aaliyah smiled warmly. Nice to meet you, Naya. Are you one of the volunteers for the forum? Naya nodded. Yes, but also, I'm one of your foundation's scholarship students. Aaliyah's eyes widened. Really? Yes, ma'am. I'm from Ghana. Your program helped me start my own small business, teaching coding to girls in my village. She reached into her bag and pulled out a photo. It showed a group of smiling schoolgirls in uniforms, holding laptops. I used to think girls like us didn't belong in tech, Nia said softly. But then I saw your story online, the one about the check. My teacher showed it to our class. It made me believe that maybe we could write our own checks someday. Aaliyah's eyes filled with tears. She placed a hand over her heart. You already are, she whispered. The two women hugged, one who started a movement, and one who embodied its future. When Aaliyah took the stage moments later, the applause was thunderous. She waited for it to settle, then spoke softly, the kind of voice that didn't need volume to command the room. 2 years ago, she began, a man tore up my check-in front of a crowd because he thought I didn't belong. But what he didn't know was that he wasn't tearing up my future, he was planting its seed. The audience hung on every word. I used to think success was about proving people wrong, but it's not. It's about proving that kindness, grace, and integrity can win in a world that often forgets them. She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd. The Carter Initiative began as a reaction. But today, it's a revolution. We've funded 5,000 women-owned startups in 22 countries, and every time a woman walks into a bank, a boardroom, or a classroom, and refuses to shrink. That's our victory. Applause filled the air again, rising like a tide. After the speech, dozens of attendees surrounded her. Eager to talk, one woman said tearfully, "Your story reminded me that my accent isn't a weakness, it's part of my power." Another added, "You made me believe that respect can be inherited, not just earned." Aaliyah smiled through every hug, every thank you. But what moved her most was seeing Naya standing at the edge of the crowd. Holding her phone, she was FaceTiming someone. Aaliyah caught her eye. "Who's that?" she asked. Nia grinned. "Someone you should meet." She turned the phone so Aaliyah could see, and on the screen was Victoria Carter, sitting in her office back home, smiling proudly. "Hello, world traveler," Victoria said warmly. "Mum, Aaliyah laughed, surprised. You're watching? Of course, her mother said. Did you think I'd miss your biggest speech? Aaliyah smiled. It went well. Victoria nodded. I saw. You didn't just speak, you moved people. That's what legacy sounds like. Her tone softened. You've taken what happened to us and turned it into something bigger than both of us. Aaliyah blinked back tears. We did that together, Mum. Victoria's voice lowered. No, baby. You took the bridge I built, and you extended it across oceans. The screen froze for a moment as the signal flickered, but her words stayed. Aaliyah whispered, I love you, Mum. I love you too. My world changer, Victoria said. That evening, Aaliyah stood on the balcony of her hotel. Looking out over the Thames, the city lights shimmered against the water, bridges stretching across the river like glowing veins. She thought about her mother, about Naya, about all the women who were now rewriting their own stories. For the first time, she realized that respect wasn't something you earned from others. It was something you taught them by showing what dignity looked like. She smiled softly and whispered into the wind, Here's to every woman they underestimated. Thousands of miles away, Victoria sat alone in her office. Watching the livestream replay of her daughter's speech, her phone buzzed with a notification. A photo from Nia's school in Ghana. The caption read, First day of class, Carter girls coding. Victoria's lips curved into a smile. So it begins, she said quietly. 2 months after London, Aaliyah stood once again on American soil, back where everything began. But nothing looked the same anymore, not the skyline, not the marble lobby of Crestview Capital Investments, and definitely not the woman she saw in the reflection of its glass doors, the same receptionist who once stared awkwardly as a check was torn in half now smiled warmly. Good morning, Ms. Carter, she said. Mrs. Carter is waiting for you upstairs. Aaliyah smiled. Thank you, Jasmine. Her tone was gentle, not prideful, not vengeful, just peaceful. She stepped into the elevator, the hum of the cables whispering memories she'd long made peace with. When the doors opened, the top floor gleamed with quiet elegance, and there, near the glass wall overlooking the skyline, stood Victoria Carter, graceful as ever, gazing out at the city she'd conquered with intellect, not intimidation. Welcome home, world traveler, Victoria said with a smile. Aaliyah laughed softly. Walking into her mother's arms, I missed this view. Her mother chuckled. It's the same view. You're just taller now. They sat together at the long table that once hosted board meetings, now transformed into a workspace filled with photographs and framed newspaper clippings, images of women from all over the world, holding certificates, smiling in front of Carter Initiative banners. Aaliyah pointed at one of the photos. Look, that's Nia. She's running the Ghana branch now. Victoria smiled proudly. You see, it doesn't take a generation to change the world anymore, just courage and Wi-Fi. They both laughed. After a moment, Aaliyah grew quiet. Mum, do you ever think about that day? The one that started all of this? Victoria's expression softened. Every time I walk through that lobby, she paused, but I don't remember it with anger anymore. I remember it with gratitude. Aaliyah frowned slightly. Gratitude? Victoria nodded. Yes, because sometimes life doesn't give you what you want, it gives you what you need to become who you're meant to be. Her voice lowered. That man, tearing up your check, taught the world a lesson I never could have written myself. Aaliyah smiled faintly. You really think people changed that much? Victoria looked out the window. Not all, but enough. She pointed across the street. Do you see that? Aaliyah turned, and her heart skipped. Across from Crestview stood a new glass building under construction. A massive banner covered its front. Coming soon, the Carter Center for Women in BOS Science, funded by the Carter Initiative and partners worldwide. Aaliyah blinked, speechless. Mum? Is that? Victoria smiled. Yes, your next office. Her daughter's voice trembled. You named it after me. Victoria shook her head gently. No, I named it after us. Aaliyah felt her throat tighten. I don't know what to say. Her mother's tones softened. You don't need to. You already said it every time you stood tall when they doubted you. Every time you turned anger into action. Every time you proved that respect isn't given, it's grown. Later that evening, the two women stood on the rooftop terrace of Crestview, the city lights reflecting off the river like scattered stars. Victoria handed Olia a small, worn envelope. "What's this?" Olia asked. "Something I've been saving since the day it happened." Inside were the torn pieces of the original check, taped carefully back together. Olia gasped softly. "You kept it?" Victoria nodded. "I told security to collect it before it hit the trash. I wanted you to see how something broken can still be made whole, just stronger in the places it tore." Tears welled in Olia's eyes. "You're incredible." "No," Victoria said softly. "We're incredible." They stood in silence for a long time, the wind brushing their faces, the skyline glowing with quiet majesty. A few days later, the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Carter Center drew hundreds of business leaders, students, and press from around the world as Victoria and Olia stood on stage. The crowd chanted their names. When it was time for her speech, Victoria turned to her daughter. "You should do the honors." Olia hesitated. "Mum, this is your legacy." Victoria smiled. "No, baby. It's our legacy. You're the reason the world listens now." Olia took the mic, her voice steady but emotional. 2 years ago, I walked into a firm that thought I didn't belong today. We're opening a center that proves we all do. The audience erupted in applause. As the red ribbon fell and confetti filled the air, Victoria wrapped her arms around her daughter. "Look at you," she whispered. "You turned a torn check into a global empire of respect." Olia smiled, tears shining under the golden light. "No, Mum, we turned it into a bridge, and the world finally crossed it." That night, after the event, the city quieted. From the rooftop of the new Carter Center, the mother and daughter watched the skyline in silence, two silhouettes, framed by the glow of their own creation. For a long time, they said nothing. They didn't need to, because in that moment, the world didn't see a scandal anymore. It saw a story of redemption, resilience, and respect, and etched on the marble wall of the new building, under the golden letters, the Carter Center for Women in Business, were the words, "Born from a torn check."